How's it going, my blokes? My name's Lance. Hope everyone's hanging in during these crazy times. Been wild out here. But anyways, today I'm going to be reviewing the Alloy of Law. I'm going to do my best. I've been trying to put together a good format for these, but I'm just going to have to experiment and find out. The Alloy of Law is Era 2 of Mistborn, so it's going to inherently have spoilers for Era 1. So if you're looking to read, if you haven't read the original Mistborn trilogy, you might want to skip this video. Or if you don't care, keep watching. So I'm going to start off with just giving an overview of the series. It's written by Brandon Sanderson. Any of you guys who don't know, Mistborn is a part of like a bigger universe called the Cosmere. And I'll put up a flow chart here. It's pretty crazy. And I think Brandon even has like a 30-year plan or something like that to keep writing these books. So yeah, there's some that are trilogies right now, some are just one-off books that he has like planned sequels for. So Era 2 specifically takes place 300 years after Era 1. I'll probably go back and do an Era 1 review as well. I don't know if I'm going to do each book or just lump them all together. But alright, let's just jump right into it with the magic systems. That's kind of what Brandon Sanderson I feel like is most known for, is like hard magic systems. Some people don't like that, but I think it's pretty cool. That was what really hooked me when I first started reading Mistborn. I'll do like a quick overview. I'll explain it the best I can. I can't go into all the details. Like that's probably like a whole video in itself of all the magic systems, but all you need to know is there's three main magic systems, which is Allomancy, Feruchemy, and Hemalurgy. So starting off with Allomancy, in Era 2, there's 16 main metals that you can gain powers from. That might sound confusing, but basically the main characters usually, or any Allomancer, they carry around these vials of metal that they like uncork and down, and then they do what's called burning, which is just using the metal inside of you, and it'll grant you abilities or powers. I'll put up a chart here of all the different metals and what they do, and as you'll see, there's like god metals and stuff too. Like I don't know, I'll talk about that more in like maybe a magic system video. There was some stuff I was a little bit like, I don't know if he changed it or not with Era 2. Because I always thought adium or whatever was I don't know, I thought that was part of the base 16 metals. It seems weird to have like 16 metals and then there's like extra metals and alloys. But I'm sure Brandon Sanderson has plans for it all. And again, I haven't even finished this Era 2 trilogy yet. This is only the first book, so there's still a lot of questions to be answered. And I should say, usually people they're only able to use one of these abilities if they're an Allomancer in the first place. It's not like in Era 1, there's Mistborns, which are super rare, which they can use all the abilities. So anyways, just jumping into the second power is Feruchemy, which comes from the Terrace people, which is a race. And it's sort of like the power of balance, they say. Instead of like using a metal to gain power, they just wear metal, and they can store power into it and then retrieve it at a later time. And there's a lot of cool stuff they can do with this. Like there's no maximum amount of energy they can release all at once, so they could like store up a bunch of strength, if that's their ability, and then just use it all at once and become like the Hulk or something, or even crazier than the Hulk. Which with Allomancy, like even when they're flaring their powers to like the maximum, there's still always like a max capacity they can really do. Of course, they can just keep downing metal too and keep burning it and like basically have infinite powers if they have enough metal. For the Feruchemy, it's you got to take time to store it first. Anyways, I'll put up a chart here of Feruchemy. As you can see, it uses the same metals as Allomancy. Almost similar abilities too, but just used a little bit differently. I haven't seen any pure Feruchemists, or I haven't even heard of any in this Era 2 so far. I've only heard of Twinborns, which we're going to talk about right after this next magic system, which is Hemalurgy. So with Hemalurgy, there's still a lot of like unknown things I feel like in the book. All we really know is that you're given powers through these metal spikes that are used to kill people first. Like basically you steal the powers from someone. It could be allomantic powers or feruchemical powers. Yeah, essentially you can transfer powers from other people using spikes, like blood spikes. And that's like what the Steel Inquisitors use in Era 1, of course. I'll post up a picture of one of them. So yeah, they gain powers from all the spikes they have in their body. And it's called like I don't know, it's almost like the dark side power, or the power of ruin, Brandon Sanderson calls it, because there's like diminishing returns on the power that's transferred. The power won't be as strong as it was in the original person, but still they get it. So it's, I mean, I guess the upside is that you can basically gain multiple abilities that way, because otherwise you can only have like one allomantic power normally. Or if you're twinborn, you're lucky, you can have one of allomantic and one of ferrochemical. Yeah, I'll put up a chart of the hemalurgy. Even I don't even know that much about all the bind points or anything like that. It seems like Brandon Sanderson might have some bigger plans for this power with maybe some of the other books. And Twinborn is basically someone who has allomantic powers and ferrochemical powers. Yeah, two of the main characters in Era 2 so far are both Twinborns. Main character Waxy is like probably one of the most powerful combos, they say. One of the most powerful, not the most. But he's basically a steel pusher or a coin shot. So he consumes steel and is able to push steel away from him. The only downside with that is if like you push against something that's too heavy, you're going to get thrown backwards. But with his Twinborn abilities, with his his Ferukami powers are also his ability to control weight, so he can store or gain weight whenever he wants, basically on the fly, and to like extreme amounts too. So basically, he can push anything, like almost anything he wants, if he just makes himself super heavy, makes himself an anchor. Or another upside of the power is he can make himself super light. Like he can basically fly. He can just send himself flying up into the sky and then make himself as light as a feather, and he doesn't get hurt from falling or anything. Wayne, the other main character, he can basically one of the new allomantic powers is he can put a time bubble around himself and slow down time, just around like, I don't know exactly how big of a space, but I don't know. I imagine like wingspan or something, or no, probably bigger because he fights people. He fights people like 1v1 in it, so I don't know. Maybe it's like the size of a small room or something like that, like a closet. I don't know. His Ferukami power is of healing, so he can store healing and then later use it. But with the time power, it's almost like speed healing. Like he can slow down time just for him and then heal up. So he could take a gunshot wound, heal up. But of course, there's limitations of that. Like I think in the book, he does take a gunshot wound at one point and heals it, but he's like, dang, I took me like 2 weeks to store up that healing power. So there's always consequences to every power and pretty much all of Brandon Sanderson's stuff. Like I don't know, if you just hear the abilities right away, you're like, oh, that just sounds OP or broken. But there's always downsides. Another crazy combination, which is almost considered like, I think this is the best combination, which is what the antagonist has in this book, which is like infinite healing. He has the same healing power as Wayne does. His name's Miles, by the way, the antagonist. So yeah, basically, if you're a twinborn and you use two of the same metals for your powers, it's called compounding, where you basically get like infinite use of it, and at like really fast rates. So that's how like the not the God King, but the Lord Ruler in Era 1, that's how he kept himself young forever. Like basically, I mean, he had all the powers though, like that, so he was basically like almost invincible. But Miles in this book is also kind of invincible, and he only has the healing powers, so essentially he can just heal infinitely. He's like Wolverine, but super fast. I think Wolverine's is really fast. Now that we got the magic systems out of the way, we'll talk about the world building a bit. Again, like I said, I think this is like one of the main focuses of this book, or one of the reasons to read it, or why I liked it. It's just because it's an expansion of Era 1. In Era 1, things are way more dark and gritty. Some of you guys might remember with like, yeah, all the ash and all that. But that's gone, if you remember from the last book. Sazed fixes the world and everything. So you get to see how everything's changed. It's way more Earth-like now. Scadrial is the planet. But yeah, I think it's like the closest planet to Earth. I don't know, I think it's like equivalent to late 1800s. Like they just discovered electricity and cars are just coming out. You do see a lot of cool stuff with guns. You can see with the combinations of powers and using guns, there's a lot of cool things that could happen. Or just cool technologies around it as well, which we'll talk about more. Yeah, as far as the world building goes, it's super cool to see the world from Era 1 and where it's at now. 300 years later, you see like a lot of new technologies. As you can see here, I'll show you in the city map for Era 2. Yeah, they've got like railways and stuff. This is the city of Ellendale. There was something I wanted to show you guys. First of all, this is good enough. This is a nice map. This is basically the Era 1 map with the Era 2 area over it. So you can see, like, this is where all of Era 2 takes place here. Like, this is where the Roughs is called, which is almost like it's like the boonies. This is where they go bounty hunting and stuff. Like the Wild West, basically, is the Roughs up here. And then the main cities down here of the city map we just saw. And then the main city in Mistborn Era 1 is Luthadel, which is like right around here, if you can see my mouse. But again, it's yeah, it's super cool to see how the world's changed. That was probably another one of the like main things that I liked about this book, was just seeing like the new technologies and how, I don't know, some of the stuff was, I was kind of like, like the cars, I feel like the technology would progress a little bit differently than on Earth with all the powers and everything and differences in the world, but some of the stuff is mostly the same. But seeing like in, I think her name's Renee, the gunsmith, when they go and visit her, she has like a whole mechanism she has for opening up her doors to her house. Like she has to use her, she's a lurcher, so she can pull metal, and there's like a contraption to open the door that you have to pull the lever basically to open it. So she could open up the doors like with no hands, which is cool. Like seeing stuff like that is what I really liked. And the guns too. Like, I don't know, if you're looking for fantasy, you're probably expecting swords and things, but the guns were actually cool. One of them was like a safety lock on a gun that you can only activate if you're a coin push or a lurcher. Like there's a metal inside the handle that you've got to push or pull to lock it, which is, I don't know, stuff like that is really cool. And then there was also, I remember mentioning mail carriers, where there's coin push mail carriers where they can just go flying across these like metal, basically a metal railway. I wish there would be like maybe even an extra 100 pages or 200 pages I would have of just stuff like that. Before we jump into talking about characters, we'll talk about more the story, the plots, and pacing and all that. I think I might have already mentioned was that it's pretty action-y. A lot of people have said, if you've listened to any other reviews, and they were right. It's fast-paced, action-heavy, and there's a lot less of like a, I don't know. In Era 1, you have this very big like doom and gloom from the start of like the threat level is up high. Story was nothing new or out of the ordinary. It was very like Wild West Sherlock Holmes. That's how I felt, at least. I don't know. I felt like the story was fine. The characters were good characters to follow, to show the expansion of the world and show these powers and their uses and things like that. Like I think it was a cool way to introduce all of that. And I do like the characters themselves, so that's a plus. But yeah, the plot is definitely not as heavy as it was in Era 1. We'll see. Maybe it'll pick up in the later books. I heard it doesn't, but there's still another 4th book coming for Era 2, so maybe it does then. We'll see. So yeah, getting started with the characters. I liked all of the characters that were in it, all the main characters. I thought the antagonist was fine too. I don't know, I don't feel as attached to them as I did the characters in Era 1. And was like one of my favorite characters out of all of Brandon Sanderson's books. I feel like you don't see as much internal stuff going on in their mind. You do a little bit with like Wax, just a little, but not nearly as much as like with Vin or any of the characters in The Way of Kings. Not really a fair comparison, but again, this is a shorter story, so it's not too big of a deal. Wax is the main character, I would say. There's like 3 main characters, but Wax is like the main character. As I mentioned before, he's a twin-born. He's a coin shot, so he can push on metal. In combination with his Farukami ability, which is controlling his weight. Kind of a spoiler, but it happens in the first scene, so whatever. Skip this part if you don't want to hear it. But yeah, he kills like his girlfriend or lover, who I think was working with him in like the first scene. It's like starts off 6 months in the past where he's in the roughs. He accidentally shoots her and kills her, and that's like one of his main struggles, definitely in the beginning of the book and throughout the book. But that's about as far in depth as it goes for like internal struggles. I feel like that's really it. That, and then the balance of him trying to be a lawman still while having to take care of his house. He's essentially a legendary bounty hunter. He's starts off like focusing around the roughs area, which is like the Wild West. That's kind of where he was raised, I guess you could say. He's in Noble, which leads into like where the story starts, is him going back to Ellendale, the city, to take care of his house. His uncle left the entire place like destitute. Yeah, you can imagine it's just kind of a struggle of doing the things you want to do versus the things you have to do for your family. He's trying to find that balance. Similar with Vin and Ellen in Era 1, both kind of had a similar thing where they're like trying to find the balance of being themselves and having to be a noble. It starts off a little bit the same way with Wax, but pretty quickly Wayne comes in. He's like, hey, remember the good old times? Trying to convince him all the time, telling him all the things that are going on in the city, trying to like pique his interest. So yeah, Marasi is the other main character in the Alloy of Law. She gets involved with the crew because her half-sister, Steris, is engaged to be married to Wax. Or I don't even know if they're engaged yet. They're just, basically, their house is kind of poor, like about to go under. So is Wax's. And so they're kind of like talking about combining forces. This all happens in the beginning of the book. Steris is actually the girl that Wax is supposed to be marrying. But her half-sister just so happens to be there at the dinner, Marasi. And that's how they meet. And at first she's like acting shy and stuff, but then as soon as like law or anything like that comes up, she like really lights up and starts talking a lot. It turns out she's a student. She's studying law and like specifically crime in cities and all that. So she starts like throwing out statistics and it gets Wax all excited. Yeah, that's how the crew kind of gets back together, and that's where the story picks up. And I like Marasi. Her and Wax kind of have like a thing throughout the book, but Wax is always like, well, he's worried about his... I think she like brings back a lot of memories about his old lover who he accidentally shot. I like them together though. I kind of wish they would end up together. We'll see how things go, but Steris, who he ends up actually engaging to, I don't know. I have read people end up really liking her. She doesn't really play too much of a role in this book, but I think she does in the next two, I'm assuming. But yeah, getting back to Marasi, she's not a Twinborn actually, but she is an Allomancer, and she has a completely worthless ability. So she is a slider. So she burns Serobend, which that's all. It's a new power and a new metal that's introduced in this book. They make jokes about it, basically that it's useless because it just speeds up time around her. So she's like, yeah, I'll just be, it's useless in battle. I'll just be staring blank forward while there's like bullets flying by in a battle. Or I think Wayne was like, well, it's not completely useless. You can use it to speed up time if you're like excited for the next day. My one complaint with this book, I feel like, is I mean, I know they led up to the 16 medals in the first book, but really there was like the prominent 8. I think the base 8 powers like all really make sense and like have their place. But the ones after it feel just a little bit weird to me. Like even like aluminum, which actually was in Era 1, but is kind of like a useless ability. Duraluminum on its own is useless. It's really only useful if you're a Mistborn. It just seems weird to have like, why add the abilities if they're going to be useless? Which, knowing Brandon Sanderson, there probably is a reason for it. So we'll probably find out later. Oh my god. Okay, yeah, I totally forgot. She actually does have a use for her power. She uses it in a very clever way at the end of the book. Yeah, the antagonist Miles, which we'll talk about next, he's in like one of the final scenes, she surrounds a time bubble around Miles and herself to speed up time around them. I think they were waiting for like backup to show up, so she basically sped up the time it took for backup to arrive. That's a pretty clever use of the ability. Some things I didn't mention about all these characters is Wax himself is a really good shot, by the way, like almost 100% accuracy. He's like really good, even moving throughout the air. Apparently Marasi is as well is like really good shot with a rifle. And Wayne is like anti-gun also. He doesn't like using guns. He fights with canes. Jumping into antagonists is this guy named Miles. He's the one that uses, he's a Twinborn and has double gold powers, so uses the compounding ability, basically like infinite healing. That's kind of the main dilemma of killing him throughout the book. They tell stories of him even like blowing off his head with the shotgun, and he's fine. As long as he has gold somewhere in his body, he can endure pretty much anything. His nickname is Miles 100 Lives. Him and Wax they know each other from back in the day. They both used to work in the roughs as lawmen. He seems like he used to be like a good guy, and I think just over time, like the struggles in life and everything, it's kind of like drove him down the opposite path of Wax. Miles thinks he's doing good the entire time. He just has like a very anti like life and society and government kind of viewpoint. And so he's like, I am doing the right thing, like I'm serving justice, but in reality he's like, yeah, killing innocents or whatever, for example. He also has like a kind of a vendetta against the city because he was like, I don't know why all the lawmen are here in the city when we need help out in the roughs, and they're kind of like betraying us. Throughout the story, the main characters are like trying to figure out how are they going to take down Miles. Like they try to capture him with nets. You basically have to capture him and then remove all the metal from his body, and then you can kill him. I even read on here, it says like he could just bring bombs with him, so if he ever gets captured, just blow himself and everyone else up, and then he'll recover and be fine. That sounds like horrible, but that's just how insane he is. I like Miles overall. I don't really like evil characters that are just straight evil for no reason. Like he seems like he's like I said, he was a good guy and he has his reasoning for doing what he's doing, and it's kind of cool to see like the back history between him and Wax. So overall, I like him as an antagonist. Let's go ahead and jump into some spoilers. Yeah, the first like major spoiler I wanted to talk about was with Sazed. At the end of the book, he talks directly to Wax, which is kind of weird, but it also kind of awesome at the same time. It's good to hear from Sazed. This moment right here, I would say, is probably like the main, like the climax of the story. He basically says he can't help him too much, but humans have the power to like make the choice for themselves, good or evil. So he's like, all I can do is present to you the opportunity, basically. Right after that scene, Wax, he sees this suitcase. He gave all of his like old weapons in the beginning of the book and he put it into this suitcase, and then he just assumed the butler like got rid of it or threw it away or something. I don't know if Sazed just like alerted him to like, okay, what is around me that I can do something about, and he noticed the suitcase and it was just coincidence and it was like, oh my god. Or if Sazed was like, oh, here, I'll help you, and gave him the suitcase, which feels kind of cheap. Like he says he can't help too much or can't play favorites because of the balance, so why would he do that? Doesn't make any sense. Then, of course, the other big spoiler is after that when Marasi runs into Marsh, which is awesome. Marsh was like, I don't know, he was one of my favorite characters from Era 1. He's apparently been alive for like over 300 years now. Must not hear from Ruin because Ruin's dead. I wonder if he can talk directly to Sazed or what. Hopefully we see more of him at like in the next books. But he gives Marasi a book to give the Wax. I don't know. I can only speculate, so please don't spoil me. I don't want to be spoiled. But I'm assuming it has something to do with like hemalurgy and possibly what Wax's uncle is up to. Trying to gather all these different allomancers. Probably, I have a feeling they're trying to like build a Mistborn. Basically trying to re-put together a Steel Inquisitor. That's what it seems like they're doing. And it'd probably be an even more powerful one if it has all 16 abilities. We'll see. But I thought it was pretty interesting that he included Marsh as well. And then that kind of ties into the whole religion thing, that he has his own religion. I would follow his religion because that seems to make the most sense then. He's the only one alive. And I wonder if he has all the same powers he must have. I'm surprised Sazed didn't like recover Marsh's body or anything. That seems like that would be a nice thing to do. He made Spook like a Mistborn for no reason. Just to like make him happy. Why wouldn't he fix up Marsh? Unless maybe he needs Marsh to have those powers for later, like to keep things in balance or whatever. I wonder. It's also, I don't know, that kind of sucks for Marsh to have to be like, his body's pretty messed up by now and he's just stuck living like that for like hundreds of years. So that kind of sucks. Yeah, talking more about his uncle, he kind of just shows up at the end and he's like, oh, I should have known it was you. His uncle basically just like ransacked his house. When Wax finally, in the beginning of the book, when he comes back from the roughs, like all the paintings and everything is gone, he assumes that like his uncle had to sell to keep the house afloat. But it turns out like the uncle just ransacked everything and just took all the money for like this scheme he's doing. Alright guys, I can't really think of anything else to touch on at the moment. Those are kind of my, well, let's see, final thoughts on the Alloy of Law. I enjoyed reading it. Like I said, it's a pretty quick read, so I didn't mind. Like, I don't know, the negatives people have about it, I don't mind. Getting kind of late, so I'm going to head out. And tomorrow I'm going to work on editing. If I can think of anything else to throw in, I will. And anyone who watched it this far, thank you so much for watching. Let me know if there's anything you'd like to see or suggestions or whatever, because I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm going to improve as much as I can on my end. So thank you so much. Bye.